strong. I still love you, that means anything at all. If you still want me, baby.
So hello, I'm John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Saturday, August 24th. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases begin or start conversations. We don't do prayers and we don't do buffalo speeches. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity, and we may step on a few toes along the way. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that is heaped upon us, and we do it all right here from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind people our audio streams at www.letstalknative.com. We stream live video of the show on our Facebook group pages via Facebook Live. And our shows are available as podcasts on your favorite platforms after our live broadcast. And we also post the video of the show up on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I do encourage people to subscribe to our podcast. Again, whatever platform you use, I encourage people to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you do so, you'll find not only the shows that we produce here, but our short form videos and more. We cracked the 400 subscriber list, so we're finally over 400. Love to get it up to 500 or so. So again, please do consider subscribing to our podcast and to our YouTube channel. I am the host of Let's Talk Native, and I'm assisted by Jake Proud here in studio, who is managing our video and our sound. Let's get into it. I've kind of following a little bit of a theme from show to show here. I first was talking about, my concerns about Native people voting in the non-Native elections. And for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is it is a clear example of assimilation. That's part of the problem. There's land issues and a whole, I'm not going to go through all that today, but as a result of me suggesting that we shouldn't vote in the non-Native elections, one of the assumptions some people made is that I'm saying we should do nothing. We should just sit back and, wallow in our oppression, I guess. And of course, that's not at all what I was suggesting. On the last program, I talked about a few things that we should do. I don't think we should vote, but there are some things we should do. And I want to expand a little bit more on that theme. We talk a lot about sustainability, and and of course, usually when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about energy and that kind of stuff. Food sovereignty is a big topic, and it's caught on in a good way and in a big way, and that's a good thing. But when we talk about a sustainable community, there's more to just putting in gardens, and again, I'm not minimizing, in fact, I think food is a big part of this idea of having sustainable communities. But I want to talk about it because, as you're aware of, I oftentimes raise my real legitimate concerns about climate change, about economic collapse. I think, there are a lot of the indicators, if you follow that kind of thing, suggest that the United States, in fact, the global economy is going to suffer a pretty bad recession, and that's going to impact a lot of people. And frankly, it'll impact us in the current state of things. But there's also two other real serious calamities I think that could face, many populations, many peoples, and that's obviously the social unrest, the racism, what's turning into, borderline race wars, not just because of a few mass killings, well, more than a few mass killings, but just the rhetoric, the hate mongering, the fear mongering that's out there. And of course, beyond that is just basically, a world at war on so many different fronts. There's military conflicts all over the place. So those four things certainly make the future look very, very bleak. And of course, we could stop killing each other and we could stop hating each other. But unfortunately, climate change is something we're going to pay for. I mean, and it's almost too late to stop climate change. So the biggest question is, how do we adapt to it? And of course, the problem with an economic collapse, many of us have no control over that happening. And so, again, we got to figure out how do you weather that storm. So that brings me back to this conversation about sustainability, because what I want to talk about is what is it that we need for sustainable communities. So I think food is a big issue. I think, growing our own food. I think the food sovereignty movement is a very positive and important topic. And I think as many of us as possible, should play a role in that. This isn't just about having a nation program. This is about having a garden. This is about gardening enough to not only create a surplus for your needs for fresh fruits, vegetables, and the like, but take it to the next step. Now we're talking about canning and food processing and food storage. And how do you, that's, again, this is stuff that is very much a part of our culture and our history. That's one of the things that we, the Haudenosaunee, the Ongwe of these regions, were known for. This idea of not just growing, but growing the kinds of foods that you can store for a longer period of time. And that way we could help equalize disparity, where somebody might be suffering from drought or famine or whether it's for trade and commerce. And now we're not just limited to just, a limited number of dry goods. Now we know how to can, we know how to dry still. We know we have the ability to freeze, freeze goods. And processing, any number of, dehydrate food. We have all kinds of stuff that we can do to store food for a longer period of time. And we should, in a community, have a more active, not just a program, but we should try to engage and get as many people involved in food storage, food processing, and of course, assisting each other. Again, when I always talk about the need and the importance of community. Community is about the relationships. So not everybody has to have a tractor and a lawn tiller or a rotor tiller. Help your neighbor put in a garden if that's what they want to do. Encourage your neighbor to put in a garden. If you have a bumper crop, share that stuff. Part of what I'm going to talk about is related to commerce, but some of it goes beyond commerce. It's just about recognizing the needs of your community and fulfilling those needs, whether it's a commercial enterprise or whether it's bartering or whether it's just being kind. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to talk about. So again, food is a big deal. And it is the most basic need that we have. So the more that we can do to not only produce food, but store food, distribute food. And not just groceries. Restaurants. On our territories, food trucks. The idea of providing lunches, maybe even our own Meals on Wheels programs. Breakfasts for our kids, whether it's, look, I know a lot of schools do that stuff, but again, we're deferring to the outside for that. And it only takes, some real strict budgetary cuts, and next thing you know, kids aren't getting breakfast. So why don't we do more of that? And on the weekends, eat together, dine together. It doesn't cost much to throw a bunch of eggs on a grill or pancakes or whatever else. But that's what I'm saying. Do these kind of things that build community by living as a community and living as neighbors and friends and relatives. So, that's an important part. Now, when we talk about food, I think one of the other areas that we oftentimes overlook is the meat portion. Yeah, I know the Seneca Nation has a buffalo program, but you know what? We have deer every place. We see them everywhere. But we don't have a butcher. We don't have a meat processor. So whether you're raising veal calf or beef, a beef cow or pigs or whatever else, we don't have any place on territory. And I know there's a few people who know how to do it. So let's have a butcher. Let's support a facility that can help process meat. So whether it's domestic animals, domestic meats, or whether it's hunted game. And now, and with that, you end up having, a certain amount of bartering, and you end up with other byproducts out of the whole thing. There's things that even the meat processors can do, whether it's sausage or, jerky or whatever else. But every community should have this. We shouldn't have to drive 30 miles to get a deer processed or only rely on buying meat from some other wholesaler. We could do some of that stuff ourselves. So I think this is part of what we have to consider. And again, this is all related to food. We should support the hunters in our community, and frankly, the hunters in our community should do more to share their bounty, so to speak. So I think these are really, really important. Again, cooks, recipes. I mean, all these things. I mean, I know they sound somewhat benign, but these are all a part of making your community more sustainable, at least from a food standpoint. And again, can't say enough about how important good quality food is in terms of maintaining health. And again, it's now it's become a bit of a trite expression to say food is our medicine, but it literally is the first things that we consume that either are going to ensure our health or hurt our health. So, and of course, we have many of the people who still have the skill set of understanding what foods there are out there in nature, not just the stuff we have to farm, but the stuff we can gather. I mean, so whether it's sassafras or whether it's other roots, whether it's what's called these Jerusalem artichokes, whatever the foods that are out there, and there's a number of wild foods out there that, again, because we can process now in ways that we couldn't before. Before you just had to catch what was ripe in season and eat. Now you can store things in a much with a much greater capacity than what we could before. So there's that. And I can't minimize this issue, childcare. And when I say childcare, I'm not just talking about babysitting. I don't mean just daycare. I mean, what do we do in our communities? And without even getting into the whole school, I mean, the full, a full-fledged school. I'm talking about what do we do to help care for our children? I mean, and that's the perfect environment to get people, language teachers, language instructors involved with these kids, and do this not as a nation. Again, everything I talk about here, yes, the nations can play a role in this, but you know what? We all can do this as families. We can do this as communities as well. So again, childcare. That's something that doesn't really exist except for through a nascent program necessarily. We should do more to support the children in our communities. So whether it's looking after the kids, from a daycare standpoint, or whether it's providing, early child development, and in that child development should be language, culture. Teach our kids to dance and sing. I mean, we shouldn't be limited only to ceremonies and to powwows to experience and express some of our cultural identity. So I think it's important that we do some of these things. But child development and child empowerment that is literally our future. I mean, literally our future. Now, we can't talk about child care if we're not going to talk about senior care. So when we talk about senior care, we really need to make sure that, especially some of our elders who may not have remaining family. I mean, and that does happen. I mean, there's no reason that anybody who is in the twilight of their lives should not have people around them caring for them. And I'm not suggesting that that's a rampant problem on our territories. But you know what? We always can do more. We can always have more interaction with seniors. And NPR does this thing they call StoryCorps. How great would it be to spend enough time with some of these older people and listen to the stories, not just the tragic stories of residential schools, but other parts of the culture and the history and what they experience. Let's record some of that stuff. I mean, these are people who are taking not just knowledge, but their experiences with them when they depart us. So we should do all that we can to embrace the elderly people in our communities and tell the stories. Look, we know sometimes the stories get skewed over time. So we may hear, 8 or 10 different truths about the same, based on the perspective on the same issue. But still, it's important to have that. It is very important to have that. Okay. Within the community, there are some basic needs. I mean, look, we need to have the snow cleared in the wintertime. Branches fall. We need to have branches cleared from the street. Look, animals get struck on the road. And I know the nation has some of those things in hand, and perhaps the state or the county does. But it doesn't always have to be that. we as individuals, we all have a shovel. We all, there's pickup trucks. I mean, there's no reason that all of us don't play a role, whether it's on the road that we live on or the area of the territories that we live on, that we do more to help each other. We shouldn't have to wait for the nation to plow out the driveway of one of our senior citizens. Anybody can do that. I mean, look, put a shovel in your kids' hands. Let your kids, encourage your kids to mow a lawn and shovel a driveway. These are the things that we've lost much of this stuff, and we still can do this thing. I mean, we need to do this because this is, again, a part of sustainability. Because if we don't have some of these basic needs in our communities met, then what do? We go into a state of complete disrepair, or we look to the outside. So a lot of the things I'm talking about here are the things we need to do as neighbors, as friends, as relatives, not just as, quote unquote citizens, but again, as people who care about each other. Home builders. Look, I know, if you look at the evolution of from people who lived in longhouses, extended families in longhouses, to being the nuclear family jammed into these little log cabins, and we can see some of the history of that still. To now to trailers, the modern longhouse trailers, double wides, and as housing programs have increased, these houses have begun to look less and less like shoe boxes and more like McMansions. But there's a part of me that says maybe we need to revisit the tiny home issue and build kick-ass tiny homes. I don't mean just basic mold saturated shoe boxes. I mean kick-ass tiny homes. These are the kinds of things that we can do here right within our community. We can do these things, and it doesn't have to cost $100,000 to build a tiny home. It's something we should bang out for $20,000. And you know what? It doesn't have to last 50 years, because most of us are going to outgrow a home, regardless of its size, regardless, of our family size. We outgrow these things, and so you replace them. But if we have that skill set, so not only home builders, but the people who can help, plumbers, electricians. I mean, and when I talk about electricians, I'm talking about the guys who can put a solar roof on your home. We don't have any solar roofs. So how do you talk about sustainability in a native territory if we have no sustainable energy? Yeah, I know the nation put up a windmill and they put up a solar farm down in Allegheny. But how many windmills, how many solar roofs do you see here on our territories? We're all clamoring for internet, but we're not thinking about what we need for power. So these are the things that we need to develop on our territories. These are going to fill the actual needs. So, and again, we're talking about power. One of the most basic things that many of us still heat our homes with is firewood. But do we work together to make sure that we have firewood for the people who need it, who maybe can't go out and collect it themselves? I mean, we could do more I mean, look, some people have standing woods and still have no ability to cut it up themselves. You see somebody who's got to clean up some trees, help them clean up the trees, and help them get their firewood in for the winter. This is something that, look, we all have young teenagers. We have young boys who can help, and girls. I mean, look, I don't want to get sexist on this thing. We can help with this stuff. We can all help each other, and this kind of assistance is a kind of assistance that binds people together, that builds these bonds that will last a lifetime. I mean, if you're an older person and you develop a relationship with a young child, whether they're your child or not, now you become invested in that child's future. And you know what? That child becomes invested in yours too. This is community building. It isn't just about fulfilling the needs and the sustainability, as I talked about, but it's the idea of developing relationships that are so important. Now, look, I'm not saying anything that anybody doesn't know, but there aren't a whole lot of shows. There's not a whole lot of bigger conversations on these things. Look, we all need to encourage the young people around us, but we need to secure and look after the future of our elderly ones as well. All right, let me see what else I got on my list here. transportation. Look, I know we mass transit. The Seneca Nation, for instance, has a bus that runs, but just basic, not just taxiing, but ride sharing. I mean, it's incredible that people are limited, even in their ability to make it down to the clinic, to get health care, to pick up their scripts, or to go to the store. I mean, it'd be great if we had more stores on our territories to provide all of the needs that we have. But beyond that, people still need to travel. Look, we're spread out in these communities, so we could create a better network of ride sharing. And I'm not just talking about getting paid $30 to take somebody 5 miles down the road, but just providing somebody with the rides that they need. Perhaps maybe even investing in a couple of vehicles that are more community owned. Whatever the solution's got to be. But transportation is a big thing, and we need to make sure that we have adequate transportation, because of childcare, because of senior care, and because we all need to get around. And it's almost impractical for everybody to have 2 or 3 cars in their driveway. And I know many of us do. I know many of us do. But there's still some people who can't even basically afford to have a car. So there's no reason that this is that kind of disparity. So we have income disparity on our territories. There's no question about that. But we have a disparity on everything from food to housing to transportation. So these are the kinds of things that we should do all that we can to overcome that, and make sure that if you have the ability, to feed more than just yourself, then assist somebody in feeding them, in feeding others. If you have the ability, if you've got cars available, if you've got time available to offer people a ride. I mean, I don't know how we live right now with the internet. There's no reason we can't post this stuff and have this information more widely available, so people can make sure they get to where they need to go. Now, through all of this, and I've talked about the kids, but the most important thing we need to do from a sustainability standpoint is make sure that our kids are safe, that our kids are taken care of, that they're educated. And I don't mean being sent to Harvard or Syracuse University or UB. Look, the education, I'm talking about basic education. Look, we are facing some really, really peculiar times coming towards us. I mean, my grandchildren are going to experience climate change in ways that my generation can't even imagine. So how do we make sure that we empower our kids both to keep ignited in their minds the innovative problem-solving solutions that they're going to have to develop as they face some of these adversities? How do we do that? Well, we can't let them grow up under a rock here. I mean, we need to coach our kids. We need to, take our kids into the, go camping. I mean, be involved physically in activities. Be involved in intellectual activities, conversations. Again, I talk about building a studio here. We should be educating our kids to develop the skill set to be communicators. I mean, one of the other things I've got on my list is PR. Look, we don't know how to handle our own public relations. Not even the Seneca Nation. They hire it out. We don't provide our own news service. I mean, look, you can go on Facebook and you can find out a lot of stuff you don't really need to know, but you can find out a lot of local stuff. But we don't have a specific news service that we provide in our community, and we should. Not just a bulletin board or a newsletter that comes out once a month, but look, with the information technology that's out there, we should support, and that might be a good thing for the youth to do. But whoever's going to do it. I mean, I try to talk about current events, but I'm certainly not a news service here. And perhaps I should do more of that. But it doesn't have to be me. It can be anybody. So the idea of covering news and doing that public relations, so people understand not only native to native, but native to non-native, that people understand what the native perspective is on things. That's part of what I do, but I'm only one person. I'm not giving the native perspective. I'm giving a native perspective. And we should have more people doing that. And I've got a studio right here open for people to try it if they want to do some of this stuff. Diplomacy. We need, and I've talked about this before on other shows, we need to recapture the ability to be diplomats, to be statesmen, to be able to go into another territory and know how to speak, not only to represent ourselves, but how to speak to engage other people, native and non-native. Look, I mean, when it comes to some of the issues that we get challenged with, whether it's, again, fracking wastewater in Cottersport, or whether it's, the next pipeline that needs to be stopped, or, whether it's a protest or a demonstration or just to be outspoken, we need to encourage more and more of us to be outspoken. Again, one of the greatest compliments I ever get from anybody is when somebody listens to my show or watches the show and they say, you gave me the information that I need so I can engage people and I'm confronted with these topics. I mean, that to me is a great compliment. But it should come from a bunch of other sources, and we should develop within our communities. This is about a sustainability. This is an important component of who we are, the ability to represent ourselves. And I don't mean just elected officials, and I'm not calling them down. Look, they serve a function. But every one of us has the ability to be a spokesperson, not on behalf of everybody else, but as a native voice, as a native perspective on the issues that we all face. We need to do more to support our, not just our children, but families in general. And not just when a family is in crisis because they had a house fire or a tree land on their house, but those too. But when we know, that somebody's got a sick child or a sick parent, and they need a helping hand, their car needs to be repaired. I mean, we need to do more to help each other. So part of that support has to be family support. And look, I know that there's agencies and departments, both at the the nation level, the county level, the state level, but I'm talking about within the community. The support that we can give. We know somebody who's battling with depression. Try to be. You don't have to be a therapist or a trained therapist, but you can be compassionate. So I mean, and this is, frankly, this is what's lacking with so many people who are suffering from substance abuse. It's a funny story, but many of the people who were enlisted during the Vietnam era, they developed heroin addictions in Vietnam. Many of these soldiers developed a heroin addiction. But when they came home, they were able to kick the habit. And why? Because in Vietnam, they didn't have the support systems. They were soldiers. They didn't have any support systems there. But once they came home and they became part of, back with their families, back with their community, then that ends up being a big factor in trying to overcome substance abuse. As long as your family aren't all a bunch of cokeheads and drunks. But to provide that kind of, family support, community support, nation support, whatever, that's how you overcome some of the adversities, whether it's substance abuse. Look, I'm not just saying, if you talk to your neighbor, you're going to talk them out of substance abuse. But you know what? Part of the whole idea with changing lifestyles is understanding that there's an alternative lifestyle to the one that you're currently engaged in. And if part of that lifestyle is community engagement, is interacting with your friends and your neighbors and your family, then that goes a long way to pushing back some of those destructive parts that have entered into our communities, and to discourage it. I'm not saying we got to be openly condemning or I don't think we have to beat each other up over it, but a lacrosse game doesn't have to end with a party afterwards, at least not a drunken party. And we know that this has happened in association even with sings and powwows and that kind of stuff. And we should be more prepared to discourage that practice. And we do that by maintaining more, again, more of a sense of community and concern for each other. What else I got on the list here? Look, when it comes to this idea of family support, look, we have to make sure that in a circumstance where somebody needs housing, shelter, maybe we provide a room or a safe house. People should have the opportunity to escape, whether it's a domestic violence issue, or maybe it's a mold infestation in a house. I mean, whatever. We should try to do more within a community to make sure that everybody has the basic needs met, and that might mean nobody should have to be homeless. And it's funny because you look on our territories, and nobody ever considers Native people homeless. At least not around here. I've been to some territories where it is, but in the cities, I mean, I've been to Winnipeg, and some of the largest percentage, one of the largest percentage of homeless people in places like Winnipeg are Native people. So how do they get to that place? So and how do we solve that? Look, I know most people are not going to listen to the show and say, I'm going to house a homeless person tomorrow. But you could. So I think this is, especially when you're talking about, a single parent, who's got a child, whether it's a man or a woman. I mean, we should make sure that no child is left in a circumstance where their environment is so insecure. So I mean, and look, this is just the stuff on my list. It's not this isn't the complete list of things, but these are the things that I think are important when you want to talk about sustainable communities. Hey, look, I drove right past the the bottom of the hour. So let me take a break here, catch my breath, and I'll check over my notes to see if there's anything else I left out. But yeah, we'll take a break and we'll be right back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native.
If you're drinking that water, red blue, red blue, red blue, baby, red blue. Every kind of people got every kind of blues, but a red man's got red blues. All right,
thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Hey, I want to thank my sponsors. I've only got a couple of them, so it didn't take long. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. I want to thank Eric White and ERW Enterprises. And I've got an anonymous. I don't know if he's really anonymous, but he just doesn't need to have it advertised that he's a donor. But look, the support that I get from those three sponsors, the ones who do something either weekly or monthly, enables us to do everything we're doing here. Now, this week this show is the first show that we've done with what we hope is our long-term internet solution. I actually climbed up on the ladder this week and I threw a cell phone signal booster up on a mast here outside the building here, and so what we're streaming right now, we're using my small Wi-Fi, what they call a jetpack from Verizon, and that's what I'm getting my internet signal for our streaming on Facebook. So, and it looks like it's worked. I mean, over the last few weeks, we had a lot of trouble with our internet. So, in this studio, I have 3 separate sources of internet feed. I've got part that's connected to the building in general. I've got a HughesNet satellite dish on the building, and now I've got this signal enhancer, and I'm using a MiFi device, which is providing me the best upload speed. So, but the support that I get from sponsors allows us to keep trying to solve the problems that we have here. So, again, I have to give a real nod to the sponsors, and of course I do have a few others who from time to time will drop a check in the mail or stop by and make a donation, and that helps us do what we do here. So I want to thank all of you. Now, the other way to support the show is to spread the word. Encourage people to subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channels, share the show. So my wife Brenda, she posts this show on on maybe 20 or 30 group pages as soon as we go live. But if look, you guys are different. All of you who listen to the show, whether you listen to it live or after the fact, you all have different friends. You have different groups that you're part of. And look, you don't have to do every show. Maybe you listen to one show and you say, that really struck a note with me. Then share that show. The more of you who share some of the content we talk about and the discussion we have, the more you spread that conversation. Now, this idea of trying to have more sustainable communities, it's not just something that would be nice. It's needed. The future looks pretty shaky, folks. And if we don't start talking about sustainability in a real life way, we're going to find ourselves very, very vulnerable. Because, look, this isn't just trouble in the wigwam here. This is trouble for everybody. And if we aren't more secure, and if we aren't creating a path to be sustainable, not only are we going to be as vulnerable as everybody else, but this is our opportunity to be the teachers. Not only the teachers to our children and to our, to each other Native communities, but to the non-Native community as well. Yeah, I hear a lot of people say, well, they're never gonna accept our leadership. Well, it's because we got to lead by example. And look, nobody has to. We don't have to sell the idea of being leaders to anybody. You just do the right thing, and people will see. Well, look, during the Great Depression, Native territories weren't in. Look, they didn't have bank accounts. They weren't tied to the capitalist system that failed during the Great Depression. So our communities were much more sustainable then, and we're a long ways from that. I mean, the only thing, the stories that I heard about the Great Depression is the biggest thing that we were lacking was were some of the were shoes. We didn't have, because that wasn't something that we made a lot of. So winter wear shoes. I mean, we certainly could have, but apparently that was one of the stories that I hear is that we had better food supplies. We had our firewood, we had our water, we had our warm homes. We had our clothing, but shoes was the only place that we were lacking. So I mean, as we go through this list of the things that we need to do to help each other, I gotta say, and I say it all the time, we're not gonna vote our way out of this, and we're not gonna pray our way out of this. But I'll tell you, there are people, and you see it on Facebook all the time. Oh, such and such is sick. Would you say a prayer? I remember when my son-in-law got sick, and he's the father of two of my grandchildren, children, and he was the husband of my daughter. I remember posting something, and I said, look, don't offer your prayers and your tobacco burnings, by alone. Look, pray if you want to pray, You burn tobacco. Do that. But don't believe for a second that your thoughts and prayers are enough. Because if you can't do an act of kindness, if you know somebody who's sick or needy, praying for them isn't going to be the solution. Doing something for them. I said that when my son-in-law says, bring them by pizza or chicken wings. Do something. I mean, do something to help somebody. Perform an act of kindness. Because again, sustainability isn't just about surviving. It's about thriving. It's about quality of life. So if we consider part of our routine or our lifestyles, if we understand that in order to maintain a quality of life, we need to be kind. We need to be generous. We need to be sharing. And it's not enough to drop on your knees and say a prayer. Or in the quiet backyard to burn tobacco. By all means, do that stuff. But you know what? When you burn tobacco for somebody, make sure you bring a child with you, so you can say, so they can witness it. Because the most important part about burning tobacco is the lesson that's learned from it. Especially once not only do you burn that tobacco, but then you follow it up with an act of kindness. Even religious leaders have said, look, if you want to pray to end hunger, if you pray to end hunger, then do something to end hunger. Don't just pray for it. So, and again, I got a handful of friends of mine who are ill right now, and I know that they have other friends besides me. But all of us, when you know somebody who's sick, or needy, or whatever, going through a hard time, don't just pray for them. Do for them. Do something. And don't just say, hey, if there's anything you need, just give me a call. No, because they're not going to call. And then, so you don't end up helping. And it's nice gestures. Hey, if you need something, just just tell me what you need. I'll do whatever I'll help. No, help. Don't wait to be called. So again, that's about sustainability too. That's about a sustainable community. The other thing I got to talk about, again, I can't overemphasize is our kids. Look, I think this is the first year that I recall that we don't have a Little League football team. The Seneca Sachems. Not crazy about the name, but Seneca Sachems. We don't have it this year. So our kids are playing, in Gowanda, or they're playing, for some other, other district, I guess. And part of it is, I don't know the full story. I don't know why we don't have a Seneca Sachems football team, for our little kids, little league football. But we need coaches, folks. We need coaches. We need to do more for our kids. So, and I'm not just for football. I mean, we need them for lacrosse, and we need them for Little League, and we need them for, our little girls. We should have a softball program. We got a Little League baseball team, but we don't do enough. And I know that's only sports, and there's more to a child's life than sports. But that should be something that should be easy for us, because we've all, have some experience. And every one of us has, have somebody in our family who has some sports experience. So we should do more. We should do more. We should never lose a program because we didn't have enough involvement in the community. Because again, if you're not committed enough to your children to even provide, a basic sports program, then what does that say about your community? You're not sustainable. That's what it says. So we need to do more. And again, there's sports, but there's other programs. We should encourage our kids to learn more, the language, dance, song, other elements of the culture. We should build things with these kids. You want to do a tiny home project? Do that with children. I mean, it could be a summer program. Maybe a summer program. You grab a dozen kids and you bang out a couple of tiny homes for anybody who needs them. Because we can generate the funds, and we can throw in the funds for the raw materials. So this is what is sustainability. When you build a caring environment in your community where you not only do some official needs assessment, but you care enough that you don't need to do a needs assessment because you know the people, you know what the needs are. That is what is sustainability. So we recognize when somebody's got a major task at their house, whether it's building something or whether it's demolishing something, whether it's a tree that's got to be taken down or a lawn that's got to be mowed or a driveway that's got to be shoveled or a driveway that's got to be plowed. These are the kinds of things that we all should step up for. Or, I mean, we should pick up one of those tasks for somebody in our community. And look, and there, I mean, some of these can be economic things. I mean, some of these can be a service for pay, but not all of them have to be. And I know this is part of sustainability is about, developing economies, but not all the economies have to be based on getting the highest price tag for every product or every service. And maybe the people who can't afford to pay, and the people who can't afford don't. I know that I'm not going to get into labels like capitalism and socialism. No, I'm just talking about the basic idea of caring enough for the people around you to make sure that the people that not just your quality of life is good, but the quality of life for people around you is good. This is what is sustainable. So when somebody asks me and they say, "Oh yeah, sure, you say don't vote, but so we're just supposed to do nothing?" No, these are the kinds of things that I'm talking about. We should care enough about what's happening in our communities that we don't have to rely on the Indian Child Welfare Act. We don't have to rely on some national, or federal law, or congressional act to protect our women, our missing and murdered Indigenous women, or our missing and murdered Indigenous men and boys, girls, or our missing and murdered Indigenous lands. This is something that we all can play a role in. And again, when I talk about the PR folks, the people who need to tell the news and keep people abreast of what's happening in a community, the diplomats, we need to support the protesters and the protectors of our communities. And maybe it's not in our community. Maybe it's in another community. Look, now Mauna Kea, I realize it's a long ways away. We're talking about Hawaii. But there are ways that we can support other native peoples who are fighting to protect something in their lands. And we don't necessarily have to go there. Of course, who wouldn't want to go to Hawaii, right? But we can't all swing that. And we shouldn't place that burden on somebody to do that. But there's things that we can do in every one of our communities. When one community is facing a challenge, whether it's some environmental disaster or a threat from a pipeline or more of Trump's shenanigans to slacken environmental or endangered species or whatever else, we can do something about it. We don't need to lobby Congress. We need to lobby ourselves. So we need to step up. We are the ones who can tackle these issues that affect us directly. Bullying. We don't need a federal program on bullying in a school. And again, one of the 800-pound gorillas in the room is that last thing I mentioned, schools. Now, there are any number of ways that we can begin to tackle the education of our kids, and whether they're being educated, primarily in public schools or not, we still have an obligation to teach them what they're not learning there. And the more confidence we have that we can provide the education for our children, the more we can pull them out of those schools. So whether it's homeschooling, whether it's building a cooperative or a collective of people, look, we don't need to build a $20 million educational facility in every one of our communities. But you know what? We can play a bigger role in educating our children. And they don't necessarily have to go to school to do it. I mean, I can name dozens of people who drop out of school and get their GED right away, and then go on to go to school, college even afterwards. So that system isn't necessarily working for our children anyway. Frankly, it's not working for any of the children. This area, Western New York. I mean, I've heard all the horror stories about Rochester and Buffalo and just how terrible the scores are on basically, literacy and mathematics. So these are things that we could do too. And look, these are services that we can provide, and make sure that people are compensated for providing these services. So again, understanding that there's an imminent threat from climate change that could change a lot of things, including, it's actually all likely going to contribute to some of the economic disaster that's coming down the pike too. So understanding that economy and climate are two major things, regardless of social unrest and war and conflict in all these places on the globe. Those two things alone are a big enough threat that we need to take a serious look at what we're doing in our communities and what we're doing with our families and our loved ones. And I'm thrilled that food sovereignty is a thing, because it's a relatively new thing, but everybody's talking. And you know what? Most of that stuff isn't necessarily being done by the elected leaders. Look, I'm not saying that some of these communities don't have support for their agricultural programs, but it isn't these elected or these appointed. It aren't the chiefs and clan mothers doing it. It's not counselors that are doing it, and they're not hiring some outside, experts to come in and do it. It's happening within. Most of the food sovereignty thing is a grassroots movement. We need to expand it beyond food. We need to look at sustainability beyond food. And I'm not saying we're doing enough on food. I'm not saying let's cut down on the food stuff and do something else. No, I'm not saying that at all. We need to do more with all of it. So this, and again, I can't say enough about how important some of this stuff is. But if everybody takes just a bit of time out of their lives to share whatever it is whatever their skill set is, even if it's that skill set is just listening, and share that with their neighbors, share that with our people who are struggling, health wise, mental health wise, financially, whatever. You cannot have a sustainable community if it's just going to be about income or wealth. No, that's not. The whole concept of wealth is, at least measured in dollars and cents anyway, isn't going to make a quality of life. Because if the only thing that you're measuring quality of life by is dollars and cents, then you're constantly on that treadmill. You're constantly on that treadmill trying to make more money. And frankly, that's what's happened. I've talked about it here on the show before, but when I was a kid, you could have one parent. Most of the time it was the father, but you could have one parent working a 40-hour job a week and support 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids. Now that doesn't exist. Now you got both parents working, oftentimes more than 40 hours a week, and the older kids are working too, just to support a household. And part of it is because we overbuilt our houses. We figure we got to have 3 or 4 cars in the driveway because we get on that treadmill. We got to spend $10,000 on Christmas. We have to spend $20,000 on Mary Jane's wedding. This is the kind of stuff that that can just make you go crazy. In our language, we refer to our family as a fire. So that fire represents not only many things in our culture. It represents our assembly, the idea of gathering as a people. But that fire is like our family. And in fact, when you have a death in the family, they talk about the logs being scattered. The image is a woman, and the name's eluding me right now, who strikes the fire of that family, and the logs go scattering. And in fact, in our funerals, we talk about cleaning the sting of those ashes and those smoke and those sparks cleaning the sting out of the eyes. So we wipe away the pain from the eyes and the tears. We clean the ears, and we soothe the throat. So we provide this clean water to clear the throat, so we can speak those kind words. We clean the ears so we can hear the kind words, and we wipe away the eyes so we can see beauty again in the face of some, the grief that we're experiencing. So we talk about bringing those logs together and those embers and those, all of those coals together to rekindle and to gather the family back together. And that's the same that goes for a community. It's not just, the nuclear family. It's the whole family. It's our community. So that fire is the symbol of our family, but it's a symbol of us coming together. I hate to say it, but we're not sustainable because we don't have that concept. We've lost that sense of community, that sense of family. We've bought into too much of the outside philosophy that says, no, what happens in my house is my own business and nobody else's. We say, oh, we can't tell people how to live. Then what do you teach the culture? How do you teach the culture? How do you teach our past and have a vision for the future? If you can't teach people a better behavior, and offer better lifestyle choices going forward, and then understand that there's no rights without responsibilities. This idea of making our communities sustainable, it's not that we have the right to do it. That's not even the issue. The issue is that we have a responsibility to do it. Now, none of this stuff has to happen overnight, but it's about changing the philosophy. So that's the conversation I wanted to have this week. And it continues from a conversation we've been building over the last few shows. But this is the conversation that I wanted to have this week. And it's not an unfamiliar conversation. I've talked about many of these things before. But I hope some of you listen. And I hope some of you take stock in some of what I've said here and think about the things that you can do that encourage your family and your community to do more to help each other. Because that's a sustainable future. I want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you back here on Tuesday. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.